Good morning, everybody. So for me, I did achieve in my calculus course. And my name is Kiandra Johnson. I'm from Spelman College, Atlanta, Georgia, in the Department of Mathematics. First, I want to give you some information so you can understand our demographics. So Spelman is the second oldest historically Black women's college. We have approximately 2,200 students, and we're a part of the Atlanta University Consortium. That's Clark, Atlanta, Morehouse, and Spelman. It's a really interesting dynamic. Clark Atlanta is a co-ed. Morehouse is a men's college. Spelman is a women's college, but any students that attend any of the colleges can cross-register at any of the other colleges. So I have males in my class, normally no more than like 5. So it's pretty much all women in my classes. We pretty much have 2 calculus courses each semester, have about 25 students max. We use the Rogowski early transcendentals. So when I was first approached by using Achieve, I was happy that we wouldn't have to use change the textbook, right? Because when we do have our adoption meetings, that's the very first thing that comes up in our meetings. Will we have to change books? And so I've already started telling my department about Achieve, and that was the first question. Is it the same? I was like, no, it's still Rogowski, so we'll be okay. Rogowski is now in the 4th edition, so that was also good because I was able to use the 4th edition and give my department a heads up on how the 4th and the 2nd editions are different. Traditionally in our calculus classes, we use WebAssign, and it's a digital homework platform, so you pretty much have homework. Problems come straight from the textbook, so that's good. You can look in the book and just assign the problems. You don't have to read through every problem to see that the problem is the same. The thing that I don't really like about WebAssign is that it is kind of just numeric answers, free response. It doesn't have that variety, so I call it, it doesn't have the variety that I saw Achieve had. I'll talk about that a little bit later. And I call it binary feedback, so it's either right or wrong. I mean, yeah, you get instant feedback, but right or wrong, that's not exactly helpful to me. The spring or the summer, I did some kind of thing where I was hey, here's a chapter, read this and complete this survey. And then in the fall of 2018, I was a part of a formative evaluation for Achieve, where it was a semester-long project, but sometimes they would say, hey, pretend you're the student and go through this lesson. And then sometimes they would say, hey, pretend you're the instructor, go through this lesson, give me your feedback. And then I did the beta study for Achieve this past spring, where it's actually implemented in the classroom. I use this... I use these terms because this is what I felt like going through this process when I was reflecting on it. But I felt that the first one, it was kind of in its infancy stage. The second one, it was in the adolescent stage. I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. I see it working. The third one, I felt like when we did the beta test, I thought it was teenage stage, but not quite college ready. So kind of like that 18-year-old, but not quite college ready, because we had a lot of glitches. I'll talk about that in a little bit. So what was I hoping to achieve? Everything that I just mentioned, right? I wanted something that was user-friendly, that gave great feedback to the students. Adaptive learning, that was the piece that I didn't experience in my calculus course, but I'm happy from Joel's presentation that should be forthcoming. A variety of questions, real-time analytics, and something that met everybody's writing preference. So how did I plan to use it going in? As we did all of this, it was pretty seamless for me because like in my classes, my class structure is already first 5 minutes of class. I give a quiz, and the quiz will either be a reading, like I know everybody was like, they don't read. Well, I give them a quiz, and it will either be on what they read the night before, or I'll pick one of the homework problems because I typically don't really look at homework. So I'll pick one of the homework problems and use that as a gauge to see where they are. In class, we do a lot of hands-on. I think somebody else mentioned, I do one, we do one, you do one, on your own. So we have a lot of hands-on activities, and then we have homework. So when I was looking at Achieve, I was like, okay, this could be good because they had in a section where they would have to read the section, right? And then I could still do my 5-minute quizzes, but the quizzes I had to create, which it wasn't too bad. I gave some feedback on a way to make it a little bit more seamless for the instructor to create the quizzes. So we have the 5-minute quiz at the beginning of class, and then the hands-on, and then the homework. So my typical class structure is this: what I give the students on the first day of class. So you guys are going to pretend you're my students, yes? Yes? Yes. Okay, and this is what I ask. I say, how many people want an F at the end of the semester? Yeah, no hands go up, right? Because at that moment, they're all looking at me like, what? I was like, okay, how many people want a D? And then, how many people would be okay with a C? And then, yeah, right. And I remind them, like, hey, this is a Cal 1 class, right? And then B's, and then the hands start going up, and then A's. I say, okay, so if that's what you want, this is what you need to do in order to achieve what you want, right? So you need to document. You must read the book, and I give them slides and stuff like that they have to fill out, kind of like a notebook. What is it called? Guided notebook. So things that I created on my own. So they document. We call it documenting. And then in class, we have class participation. And in my classes, it's like you have to try really hard to not participate. It's like, yeah. It's almost to the point where I get obsessed sometimes. Like, I'll put you out if you're not participating, because it just vexes me so much. And then they have homework and then office hours. And then I go through this with them, like, what does each of these mean, right? For the sake of time, you guys could, jot that down. And then participating in class, what does that mean? So I don't spend time putting notes on the board, right? That should already be in your notes when we come to class. And if it's not in your notes, when the notes are on the board and I'm doing a problem for you, you miss that problem. And then when it's time for us to do one together, you're still trying to figure out what happened on that problem. When it's time for you to do one on your own, you're still trying, right? And so I was like, I can tell clearly if you didn't document. So we go through that kind of the first week of class. I reiterate, and then do the problems with me. You do one together, and then you do one on your own. Exam, the layout is pretty much here. And when I saw this, one of your presentations, you said that if it was less than 10%, it wasn't good. And I was like, oh, wow. So, yeah. But again, like in my class, you have to participate. You can't sit there and not participate. So that's why I make it 5%, because like everybody normally gets no less than a 90 for participating. Achieve in here was a part of the homework. When I first did this, I was like, I don't know how this is going to work. So I don't want to make it too much and affect the student's grade. So I'll put it in the homework. And also, like I said earlier, I do 5-minute quizzes at the start of class. I also do weekly quizzes kind of every 2 or 3 weeks. They're longer, like 20 minutes. But the 1-point quizzes, that also went into the quiz grade. So then Achieve was affecting the homework and the quiz grade. All right. So what was I hoping to accomplish? I wanted something. I'm always looking for something to complement what I'm already doing, right? None of us, right? We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We don't want to have to do something totally different, and something that's meaningful and engaging in my class structure. So how did I incorporate Achieve? Well, in each, I was very, very, very grateful that they sent me this platform. So for every section, for every chapter, they had already created like a reading assignment, guided learning and practice, and homework. So it was really easy for me to just go in and edit the assignments. So I thought that was great. That was a humongous time saver. So the reading fit in with my documenting, because now the students could just click on that and it takes them straight to the textbook, right? And they can take notes and do whatever they were doing prior. The guided learning and practice, we started using those during class. So instead of, I would assign it and, tell them, hey, take a look at it, but we would primarily do it together in class. And then the homework was due, like I mentioned before. So how did it go? Yeah, so immediate feedback, I'll look at immediate feedback, variety in the question deliverables. I won't talk about that. But the real-time analytics and the focus on learning preferences. So this was an example, maybe not the best example, because there were some feedbacks that were a lot more descriptive than this one. But this was an example, for instance. So the immediate feedback, a student would type something in, and it would tell them like, hey, maybe you should try to do this instead, right? Is this what you did wrong? And on some of the questions, the people who created Achieve, they had programmed it to where you could have like 8 different feedbacks, which I thought was fantastic, because if a student gave one answer, then it was like, oh, this is probably where they messed up, and it would give them this feedback. If they gave a different answer, oh, this is their error, and it would give them this feedback. So that was really, really good for them to give them valuable feedback. And then the variety in questions, like some of the questions were multiple choice, fill in the blank, true, false. And they did really, really go through Bloom's taxonomy, because some of them, it wasn't just like on my test, for instance, my true false says, if false, correct the statement. So I don't want you to just guess 50-50, right? And so even in some of the problems, it was like, this is false because of this, this, this. This is false because of this, this, this. And I was like, yes, I love this. I can steal some of these. And then I love that it had assignable problems with interactive figures, because, you know, you want students doing stuff, looking at stuff. So I did this really quickly. Let's see if this is going to work. This was an example of something from the ebook.
X approaches pi over 2 of tan x over secant x. So we're using the interactive figure or the dynamic figure to see if L'Hopital's rule applies. L'Hopital rule says if the limit of the numerator and the denominator approach plus or minus infinity, then we can use L'Hopital.
So the students are looking at this number right here, and you can't see it. I'm sorry, because I was going to actually give you guys a quiz and make you answer the question.
Right. The limit of the quotient looks like it's getting closer and closer to what number?
Can y'all see that number? No? Oh, boo. Okay. All right. So, then more of the ebook.
If you said 1, you are correct. So we see other examples.
And like if I slowed down and you saw some of the other examples, it actually had an example in there from chemistry or from physics, right? So I really like that because, oh, I'm sorry. I really like that because students are always asking, especially in math, where will I ever use this? Why do I care, right? And so I'm a big proponent on, well, this is where you're going to use this. Hey, pay attention, because you'll need this in your physics class when you talk about, I don't know physics, but yeah, I ask my physics. I have a consortium of physics, biology, and chemistry professors. I'm like, hey, where will they need to use blah, blah, blah? And then I come to class and pretend like I know a whole bunch of stuff, and I just repeat what they told me. All right, so also the focus on learning preferences, I couldn't find like a really good one, so I didn't copy and paste, but you have the reading, right, where they can read the textbook. They had videos where they can watch the videos, interactive figures. So again, that's tapping into all the learning preferences. We saw something like this earlier in, I think it was Sapling, right? So when I saw that, I was like, oh, that's an Achieve too, that's cool. So you have the real-time analytics. So here, the things that are correct, here are the things that are incorrect. So if I'm looking at this 10 minutes before class, right, then I just click on this question right here. I'm like, okay, well, what's going on with this guy? With these two, actually. So then I click on these two questions, and then I can give a quiz first 5 minutes of class, and then I know, hey, let's look at these questions real quick before we move on to the next section, right? So I thought that was really, really good. All right. So, what didn't work? So opportunities for improvement. So remember earlier I mentioned that I thought it was in the teenage stage, right? So it wasn't quite college ready. I'm hopeful for next semester. I think it wasn't quite ready to go through a beta test yet because we had a couple of issues. The system wasn't always reliable. So in those first 5 minutes of class, I'm like, okay, guys, take out your, devices, 5 minutes, go, right? And we would have strange errors pop up, or the system wasn't, activated, not always available. And so then after a while, I was like, we know in class, every minute counts. Yeah. So after a while, I just reverted back to what I normally do. I was like, this is taking up too much time. So then I went back to my traditional daily quizzes, take out a sheet of paper, here's the problem on the board type thing. Human error, and this happened in the beginning of the semester. The answers weren't always coded correctly. So the problems were randomized, right? Different numbers, but the answers were only for one set of those numbers. And so my students would come and be like, well, she got the same answer, but our numbers were different. Why did we get the same? So, I called Achieve. I was like, hey, this isn't, like, Billy Joe became my best friend. So I was like, hey, this isn't quite right. and it wasn't always user friendly. So in order to create the quizzes, it would be about like 5 or 6 unintuitive clicks, right? You would create it, then have to go back and then find out where it was, and and so those were some challenges. But I will say that everybody was very responsive. By the end of the semester, all issues were fixed, right? And whenever I had an issue, they were on it. And if it took them a couple of days, they were communicating every day. So the customer support was great. So yeah, in the spring, they weren't quite college ready, but I am hopeful for the fall that we will be college ready, and excited to see exactly what Achieve has to offer. And that's it.